Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is pollster and political consultant Frank Luntz. Frank, thanks so much for coming on.
It's my honor.
We have a big conversation today, mainly about the state of the 2024 presidential race. Let's talk about some most recent news, which is Nikki Haley. In a speech on Tuesday, she pledged to stay in the 2024 GOP primary race until the end. What do you make of this?
I think the end is coming in a matter of days, even hours. I don't see how you can remain a viable, credible candidate if you lose your home state by 10, 15, 20 points, even more. She had a good run. She's very effective. She surprised people with how much she, in some ways, has earned the shot at the presidency. The fact is, the Republican Party is now the party of Donald Trump. It's no longer the party of Ronald Reagan. Nikki Haley did best among independents, moderates, centrists, but that's not the majority of the GOP. She can go on if she leaves gracefully and doesn't agitate people. She can go on to be a candidate in 2028. In fact, perhaps even the front runner. But I think it's pretty clear that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, and unless the Democrats force him out, Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. Obviously, you're saying that she doesn't really have a shot of upsetting in South Carolina, but what is the benefit politically for her staying in? Because you did say she has a shot maybe in the future in 2028 if she leaves gracefully, but she's, digging her heels in a bit here.
Well, it's funny that you use that phrase. Yes, I know you didn't mean it that way, but that's how politics has become. They were looking for any way that if I said that phrase, I'd get yelled at. But a reporter can say it. No, she's tough. And she is making a very clear statement that there should be an alternative to Donald Trump. And there are an awful lot of people across the country, donors, grassroots advocates, activists, that appreciate that. But make no mistake, among registered Republicans, Donald Trump is going away the most popular candidate. And in the end, Governor Haley did not make great inroads among Republicans. Her greatest strength were among independents, conservative Democrats, and people outside the Republican Party.
So if you think that she has a shot in 2028, what does the future of the GOP then look like once it's moved on from Donald Trump, whether he wins or not?
Well, that's the whole question. Does he win? Because if he does, it's a completely different outcome than if he loses. Look, he's got 91 indictments that he has to deal with. He's got 4 major court cases as well as some civil trials. He's already lost 2 of them, but they haven't damaged his popularity. And the fact is, the likely Democratic nominee is so unpopular, and he's losing support. Every day, Trump increases. Every day it becomes more likely that Trump is not just the nominee, but is elected president. Now, one caveat to that. We do not know what happens if he's convicted, which I think is likely in at least one of these cases. We've never elected someone who's been charged with a felony, let alone elected someone convicted of a felony. So all bets are off. And I know that you're asking me to make some projections and prognoses. All I can say is the Republican Party today is the party of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the Republican Party today.
Let's talk about those legal cases a little bit. As you said, he faces 91 charges. He owes more than $440 million before interest in civil court fines. He's still facing legal trouble ahead. Do you think, or how do these legal challenges impact 2024?
And this is the amazing thing. Every time he was indicted, his polling numbers went up. Every time they kicked him off the ballot, his polling numbers went up. Every time he's challenged, every time that some issue, some incident, some action, or some quote, every time he says anything, his numbers go up. His support is so intense, so passionate. I know that every time I criticize him on Twitter, I get thousands of people screaming at me. I know that when I appear on a TV show, if I say anything negative about him, they get flooded with complaints. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what the issue is. If it's pro-Trump, his people will endorse you. If it's anti-Trump, his people will kill you. And so these court cases, until, if and when he is found guilty, then we'll need to re-examine it. But at this point, in February, March, April, May, June, even as they come to trial, Donald Trump seems politically immune from what would have destroyed any other person in American politics.
What about President Biden? As you mentioned, he is an unpopular president. Just a bit over almost 2 weeks ago, a special counsel report came out on his handling of classified documents. Do you think this will in any way impact 2024?
It's happened already. Biden continues to lose support. Democrats continue to look at him and say, you know, Mr. President, thank you for your service. Thank you for beating Donald Trump. Thank you for all that you've done to put the country back on track. Now, sir, please retire. We get this in focus groups. We see this in polling, that even people who like him, who like what he's done for the country, still look at him straight in the eye, as I'm doing to you right now, and say, it's time to go. What I do not understand is when that number hit 80%, who now say that Joe Biden's age is a reason to vote against him. When that number reaches 80%, it's a national consensus. But it does not seem to have any impact on his eagerness to participate. I'm told that his biggest supporter in this is Joe Biden. I would have thought that she, more than anyone, would have wanted him to retire, to have time together. We've never seen this kind of politics. Biden is in worse shape today than Ronald Reagan was. And we look back on it now and we think, why didn't we ask President Reagan to step aside those last 2 years when he was battling certain conditions? We see it in Biden's walk. We hear it in his talk. We watch him participate in these press conferences. Look, I know this guy. I met him. As a human being, he's one of the most decent. But in the end, the public is saying enough. But he doesn't hear that.
If the public is saying enough, Democrats saying enough, is there any world, based on the Democrats you've talked to, that would instead change their vote from Biden to Donald Trump?
That's a good question, and it's not likely. But this election is going to be decided by 1 or 2%, which means these third-party candidates, if they decide to run or participate, are going to have outsized impact. When someone says to me, well, that candidate is only getting 3 or 4% of the vote, well, yeah, 3 or 4% is going to determine at least half a dozen states, probably more. In fact, you're going to have half a dozen states decided by 2% or less. So make no mistake, an independent candidacy, depending on where the votes come from, is going to have an outside impact. And there are so many Democrats who will not vote for Donald Trump that they're looking for this third-party alternative. And there are plenty of Republicans doing the same.
Let's talk about one of those third-party alternatives, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We all saw his Super Bowl ad. Do you think he has a chance to be a real spoiler here?
Make no mistake, there are millions, maybe even 10 million people considering voting for Bobby Kennedy Jr. Half of them because of his name, a quarter of them because of his position on vaccines in general and COVID in particular, and a quarter because they simply will not vote for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It is possible that Kennedy could get 10% of the vote. It is absolutely possible, if not likely, that he'll throw the election to Donald Trump at this point because he still gets more votes from Democrats than he does from Republicans. But as time goes on, that partisan difference is changing. He started off much more impactful in the Democratic election, and yet his appearances on Fox and his willingness to endorse some of Trump's positions have made him more acceptable to Republicans. So it's possible that he'll be drawing from Donald Trump as well. I take him very seriously. I listen to what he says. I watch his ads, which I don't think are all that effective. Um, he's going to be a player in 2024.
I do want to pivot just a moment. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is urging Democrats to vote uncommitted and not for President Biden in the Michigan primary based on the White House's response to the Israel-Hamas war. Do you see this making a real difference in this primary?
It's possible that it make a difference in Michigan, and not in the primary, but the general election. Michigan is going to be decided by 2 or 3%. And in the general election, and now here's the problem. You now have Jewish voters that feel that Joe Biden hasn't been supportive enough of Israel that go along with voters of Arab descent that think he's been too supportive of Israel. Basically, Joe Biden's being blamed by both sides for not doing enough, and that's the worst situation to be in. Michigan is one of the 3 or 4 most important states, along with Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And all these states are within 2 or 3%. All these states, one policy, one program, or even one candidate, one local candidate can make a difference. So yes, Michigan is in play. The Jewish vote is in play. The Arab-Israeli conflict absolutely matters, but so does Ukraine. So does the border. I'd like to think that we vote on a wide variety of issues, but if you're in Arizona or you're in Nevada, immigration is probably your number one issue, and you're not happy with Joe Biden right now. In Pennsylvania, the economy matters so much to you, and in Michigan, and more than anything else, it's inflation. That's also a challenge for the current president. But then again, you have to look at it and ask this question: do you want Donald Trump and all that chaos to come back again? Basically, what I'm saying to Forbes listeners and viewers is that we're a pretty unhappy lot. We don't like our choices that we have, and they're going to be our choices in November. So we're kind of throwing up our hands and saying, why is this happening?
Frank, in all of your years as a pollster, have you ever seen this dissatisfaction with both candidates across the board?
I thought that 2016 was going to be the worst election ever, and it was pretty bad. And the debates were pretty bad. But the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is even worse in 2020. Viewers watched it and were disgusted by it, how rude they were to each other. But as mean and vicious as 2016 and as pathetic as the debate in 2020, it even makes me cough. It actually makes me sick. It makes me long for the days of the 1980s and Reagan and Carter, or Reagan and Mondale, or even Bush and Clinton, Dukakis. Those were good elections. The last good election I remember was Barack Obama running against John McCain. That was an honorable election. They disagreed over policy and they didn't tear each other apart. In 2024, you haven't seen anything yet. It's going to be can't use that language, I don't think, but it's going to be really, really ugly.
As we sit here less than 9 months from that, what you're describing as that really, really ugly election, what specifically are you looking out for next, aside that this seems to be the sequel that no one wanted or asked for?
That's a very good question. It's hard for me to explain. It's part of our political process, and it's actually a great way to end this conversation. Sometimes you end up getting what you didn't want, and you realize it wasn't so bad. I think we're going to look at this election and say, well, we got what we wanted. We got what we voted for. We got the winners of the primaries. And maybe we should have voted for or hoped for something else. We certainly didn't get the choices. We certainly did not get candidates that are looking to raise the bar or looking to really address issues. And I'll close on this thought. Democracy works best when you have an informed electorate that understands the point of view of both candidates and picks up both sides. Right now, we get our news to affirm us rather than inform us. And I'm choosing my words very carefully now. We want to know that we are right rather than being truly informed. And we are increasingly rejecting information that goes against our worldview. I think it's very dangerous for the country. I think it's very dangerous for democracy. And yes, I am pessimistic about the future. I'm hoping that something will happen, a third party candidate, a different alternative. I'm hoping that America comes to its senses because we're the ones creating this. If you don't like Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you vote for something different. And they haven't, and they won't. So that's exactly what you're going to get. You know what? In a democracy, you deserve what you vote for.
We will end it on that note. Frank Luntz, thank you so much for your insights. You are welcome back anytime.
I appreciate that, and I will return anytime.